Welcome everyone to the October 10th City Council work session. The topic tonight is South Willamette next steps. I was just going to City Manager. I was just going to have him put the motion on the table, or you want, okay.
No, that'd be great.
Go right ahead, George.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I move the following. The city manager is directed to prepare, in consultation with the appropriate city staff and the elected boards of the four city chartered South Eugene neighbors, Friendly Area Neighbors, FAN, Southwest Hills Neighborhood Association, SHINA, Southeast Neighbors, SEN, and Amazon Neighborhood Association, Amazon. A proposal for a planning process that is based on the South Willamette Street Initiative, Attachment A of September 26, 2016, work session AIS. The city manager's proposal shall embody the basic structure and elements of the South Willamette Initiative. However, the proposal may make limited adjustments to the geographic boundaries, the composition of the planning team, and other details. The proposal may also include recommendations for additional guidelines for the refinement plan process to be established by City Council. A preliminary draft proposal shall be presented for council and public review no later than November 7th, 2016. A final draft proposal shall be presented for council and public review no later than December 1st, 2016. Council's initial discussion and further direction to the city manager on the proposal shall be scheduled for the December 14, 2016 council work session. Council's deliberation and action on the proposal shall be scheduled as soon as practicable, follow swearing in of the new council, and I'll just add in 2017.
Moved and seconded, I heard. All right, so do you want to speak to?
I would like to speak to it briefly, Mayor, and then listen to everyone else's comments. Well, this is a way to move forward in planning on South Willamette. The scope is reduced quite a bit from the earlier process, and the residents and business people will be the main constituents of the planning team under this scheme, and so the ideas will come from the bottom up with plenty of staff input and plenty of community input. There'll be many points along the way where the whole community, anyone that wants to, can weigh in. In fact, I'm just guessing, but the planning team, once it's constituted, will probably seek outside expertise in the whole process, and then certainly staff will be there to help them. But the main idea is that will be led by the citizens, the residents in the area. And it's not a radically new process. We've done it many times before. You just look at the list of neighbors and neighborhoods that have refinement plans. And so I think I'll just stop here and listen to what everyone else has to say.
So I have Mike in the queue, but before I go to him, City Manager, as you look at this, any comments you want to make, especially regarding the timing and make, is this all going to work out with what you can do?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think what it feels like the intent is by December 14th, which is your last council work session, the council gives direction to us. So that feels like that's sort of the set date for moving forward. And then, of course, the post swearing in. The one concern I have is if there's any flexibility in the first couple of dates to get to that point. As you know, we're also trying to move the Envision Eugene stuff to you, so it's some of the same staff doing both of those. And so it's not about not doing it, but is there a possibility we can build in some extra time, particularly in the front side of it, to also still get to the place where the council has the ability to act on the 14th? That's just my concern, is just the timing of this. The volume of the work for the staff. It's not about meeting your 14.
I understand that. I can speak to that. I envisioned the November 7th date. Well, actually, I think it was November 1st originally, and then to accommodate Councilor Zelenka's absence at the last meeting, I thought, heck, sure, he should be here, so we can delay it a couple of weeks. I regard those more as check-in points, not like, totally pounded out. And I don't think we meet on either one of those dates, but they could present it to us electronically and available for the whole community to look at electronically and, disseminate it on the newsletters and websites and maybe inform people that way. But yes, I mean, so I think the most important date is December 14th, and I didn't put it in the motion, but I was regarding those other dates more as check-in dates of see like what progress has been made, how are the discussions with the neighborhood groups going, preliminary ideas for goals and objectives.
So would that be
The
more
neighbors
of
have
just a-
actually reviewed the initiative in some detail, and I know that they're ready to get moving on this, so.
So part of it would just be, is that just sort of a status of where we are with the proposal, that first date? So for example, of course, we want the consultation with all the 4 neighborhoods. We'll need to sit down with their,
Well, I'd like it to be more of at least a preliminary plan.
So it's more than a check-in.
yeah.
It's considerably more than a check-in, I suppose, but I don't expect a completed plan because I agree with you, that's not enough time. I mean,
It's a capacity issue for the staff on as we move forward with Eugene and this, so.
Do you have another suggestion that that could be considered?
I guess what I would think about, the preliminary and the final draft, do you see those as significantly different than one of another? So if we meet with all of the neighborhoods and put all the proposal as is in the motion and is in the attachment, do you see 2 different needing to come back? Or if we put it all together and come back to you and say, here's the draft for that for comment, and then you'll get comment, and then you'll come back on the 14th to actually give further direction. So I guess, Mayor, what I would suggest is if the December 1st date, for example, is the date to have a good draft proposal that all the neighborhoods have weighed in on and whoever else is, like the 4 neighborhoods, then I think we could give you a complete proposal on here's our recommend a final proposal. We can send that out, and then the council can provide direction. That would be my
That's
thought.
acceptable,
How
yeah.
about, George, if the,
Is that a friendly from the manager?
I just wanted to add to that before we friendly. November 7th, I think it's good to check in on a regular basis, so maybe.
We can provide an update. So I
Right,
think it's
update.
appropriate to say, yes, we've met with these folks. This is what we're doing for sure. I think that would be very appropriate. An actual proposal, if we could wait till the 1st that we give you the proposal, then there's still time for the public to weigh in, and then you'll make your direction on the 14th.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
So we could do
Someone,
So whatever the language should,
one of the counselors wants to,
Agreeable to
I would just
second.
change that myself if I get a second. Okay, all right,
And agreed.
I can second that.
okay.
well, so.
Guess that's been seconded.
The seconder of the motion has to be the one to do that, so thank you, Greg, but it was Mike, so thanks. Okay, so then, Catherine, you're going to work on that updated,
I will just provide some quick language for you and
okay, great. And so, Mike,
Thank you, Mayor. The importance of this way forward to me is twofold. Number one, I think that the refinement plan provides one end of a bookend as we move forward to how we're going to develop the community more densely. That provides, and I really was happy to hear that when I was listening on the phone the other day, because I agree with you that clarity and certainty are, I think, provided at a very detailed level by a refinement plan. And I think that's the way we avoid the kind of arguments and misunderstandings that we have seen when a thing like that is available for everyone in the public to understand as the rules of the game before we proceed further with other developments in the area. So for me, it provides the kind of clarity that we require to operate smoothly and to accomplish our goals. But secondly, the important piece for me about having that start at the neighborhood level is that there have been well, let's say it this way. Our whole community has a lot in common, and we develop our community-wide goals, and the council's direction to a neighborhood to proceed with a refinement plan reflects that. Always will say, okay, neighborhoods, go and do this good work of creating the refinement plan based on your specific knowledge of the specific neighborhoods in your area, but keeping in mind that we're putting the sideboards of city policy on this, and you must stay within them. And I think that's important. It's important for then the neighbors to develop that, because what's important to some people who live in my area of North Eugene might be very different to people who just occasionally visit it from deep in West Eugene or wherever. And there are individual character pieces of the different areas of our community that are very important specifically to the people who live there. So I think with the direction of council and pre-existing policy to those neighbors, like the ones in River Road and Santa Clara that are doing it now, to say stay within these sideboards and go and give us a clarity and a refinement plan that then we can bring back and say, does this actually match up to city policy? It'll go through the planning commission, it'll go through public hearing, and then it comes to council before it's accepted. So it has the kind of review process that allows for all city points of view to be considered with what these neighbors have come up with. That's why I support it.
So I have a couple things that I'd like to bring up. One is I see here, George, in the motion about when it comes to council, and probably would feel better if it had language in it for a vote.
Well, the
Manager will
respond
bring
to
that back to us in December.
Yes. It just says it'll come back for a work session, and I just was saying, clarifying it's coming back for a vote on December 14. I think that's what you were saying anyway, so I don't.
Well, no, actually, I was saying more to, if not, our initial detailed discussion on
On the 14th?
Yes, that's what that's for.
Your initial?
Well, details, no,
Detail,
because, see,
okay.
there's the check-in, and then there's a draft proposal.
So this doesn't, so what you have here doesn't include making a decision?
No, the last sentence, the deliberation and action on, final deliberation and action on the
Okay.
proposal would come later. I won't be here, but
Here?
but the new council and the new mayor would be there.
I get that, so I
for that.
guess action means vote.
That's what
Right,
action means.
got it. So
Right.
maybe we can clarify. The other one for me that's missing is, I think counselors from wherever this is being done in whatever part of the city, the counselors from that part of the city should be part of the group that works on it.
Yeah, I agree, but I've got some other ideas. See, the initiative initially was just a framework, but to use, and then the planning team, once they're selected, and by the way, council will approve the planning team.
Right?
So, but that's how it's been done on every other refinement plan. Council approved the members of the planning team, and sanctioned them.
My
and-
experience makes me, I don't care when it happens, if it happens there, that's fine. But my experience is that sometimes that doesn't occur unless we say that that's going to be part of the process, that the counselors from those wards will participate. So however you
Well,
want to say
Yeah,
that.
well, I could put that in the initiative, but the idea is not to have us tonight say that the initiative is the only way that this can happen. This is the only part of the process that we will approve and nothing else. I'm not saying that because the planning team and working with staff and after hearing, other people in the community weigh in, they may very well add that element. I think that's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that before, but I don't especially want to do that right now because.
I'll just put it out there as my,
Well, I think it's a good idea.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Chris since he hasn't spoken, and then I'll go to you.
And Mayor, can I get in the queue?
Yes, you can. After, welcome, Glad you're here, Claire. So after Chris is Claire, and then to Mike.
Yeah, thank you. I am actually very appreciative of what Mike was saying about, guardrails and being able to provide oversight for the entire community, because I do think the clarity that can provide will be important. And I'm willing to support this, because I think if a refinement plan can get us to that level of clarity, that's okay. And I think with the willingness to look at the slight limited adjustments to the team to make sure that not only neighborhood interests are represented, but that there may be somebody from transportation, let's say, or something like that. But anyway, what I want to do is have a process that is led by the affected neighborhoods. That is something that I agree with. It should be a process where that is the dominant voice and that is the leadership. What I want to be vigilant about as the best outcome is to not turn Eugene into a series of isolated, self-contained islands where each island has determined what it wants to be, and it's unrelated to all the other islands, so that we're no longer a city, we're now a series of disconnected pieces. I think we can try to achieve the outcome that you described, which is the guardrails, the clarity, to try to retain that sense of a Eugene-wide decision that still allows the local people to have the dominant and leading voice in what happens in their neighborhoods. I'm totally supportive of that. So it will be a balancing act, and I am going to be optimistic that we can maintain that balance as we move forward, because I know that the neighbors want to see us make a clear statement that they should be the leadership of what happens in their neighborhoods. And I think that's what this will try to do. And at the same time, I will look for the best outcome that says that will happen in light of the fact that each neighborhood is a part of the larger city. And how can we make sure that those two interests are balanced appropriately? And I think this proposal moves us in that direction, especially with the suggestions that have been made this evening. So I can support it. I think it's moving in what could be an effective direction.
Claire, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry to have been absent. And while I've not been able to be there in person, I have been paying attention. I watched the South Willamette Forum, and I've watched the City Council discussion on this follow-up, and also tracking the public input we've gotten via email. So I appreciate the hard work and the dedication shown by those who have engaged with us in this effort, and I appreciate the thought that Councilor Brown has put into this proposal. And I don't disagree with the views of my fellow councilors about the importance of the neighborhood refinement plan. But I have a different perspective on whether or not to move forward on this at this time. I feel that the proposal to work on a refinement plan for this small section of town doesn't serve to address the larger issues which staff had hoped this process would assist with, which is how do we take Envision Eugene commitments and goals and make them real at the neighborhood level. Initially, the South Willamette zoning changes process was meant to be a template for doing similar work across the city, and it didn't have that desired result, so we still need to figure that out. So I feel that rather than dive into a specific plan for a single strip of commercial area, we should be spending our energy and staff time figuring out how we share the burden and opportunities presented by Envision Eugene across the city. You may recall some folks in South Willamette asking, why are you doing this to us? Why are you picking on South Willamette when other parts of town seem more suitable for zoning changes to meet housing goals? So I think I would prefer that we took the approach suggested by We Can, which we all received, I think, a very robust template, that we would avoid any particular neighborhood feeling targeted and instead provide residents and city staff with a way to engage the entire city in looking at how each area of the city would play a part in addressing future growth and other needs related to land use planning. Then I think we could circle back to South Willamette and dig into the details of a refinement plan with that broader context in place. Otherwise, I fear that we'll end up in a similar situation that we're in today and not make progress we need to make on our broader land use issues.
Thank you. Yes, George.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'd just like to respond to
Oh,
Councilor.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. Mike was in the queue.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. For me, I appreciate Claire's remarks, but I would suggest that I think that approach will take a longer period of time to accomplish than what is laid out here for the manager to bring back to us. For me, this process has drug on long enough. I believe that and I appreciate what Chris is saying and agree with you. What you don't want to create is separate little enclaves of, that are at opposition to broader citywide goals. I couldn't agree more. Those goals, though, are measured and determined by us. So at the end of the day, what the neighbors come up with will have to meet those. Otherwise, we will have the final opportunity, as will the Planning Commission, to make adjustments so that they do so. And I think that's the appropriate way to do it, so the neighbors feel heard and their body of work is something they can be proud of. I know that when the Willikenzie refinement plan was done, it pays very specific attention to some of the characteristics in North Eugene that are different in other parts of the community. That's what I'm saying. There are just differences in parts of our community. River Road in Santa Clara has more swales and different types of roads than other places that many of the people who live there would like to maintain to the best they can. So I think it's important that we set out a process that allows them to have their voice from the very beginning, and we meld that then later so that we have certainty and clarity for moving forward. And I think this is the way to do it in the fastest possible way. To George's and to the previous discussion around timing, from my perspective, this is not going, and if I understand it correctly, it's not going to be reflected in an ordinance that will go through public hearing or be passed. So this is direction to the manager at the moment to say, come back to us with the specific rules and guidelines for how this process moves forward. I don't need it to have as many check-ins as my friend George does. I'd just as soon we, by December 14th, say, okay, here's our process. Now we're moving forward, and we put it into play in the next year. But I'll defer to my friend George on the motion. We will still have that opportunity to make that decision. If we come up with something by December 14th that all agrees the best way to proceed, then I think that we will have that choice at that time. So from my perspective, I'll look forward to the specifics based on these guidelines
We're going
and hope
to
we
you,
can move
George. I'm
forward.
going to go to this, George.
Sure, of course.
First, before we take a vote, I'd like to have Alan brought up to speed on, if at all possible, on what we've discussed so far before we go too much farther.
You want to do that?
No, not really.
I'll do it.
I just want to make sure that he's aware of the motion, and it's going to be changed. So and there's been some discussion.
Yeah, we'll get Catherine to tell them what the changes are.
The other thing is, my biggest concern is I guess I want to make sure that the other neighborhoods there aren't any unintended consequences as a result of the process that we're setting up for these four neighborhoods, areas that are going to negatively impact the Northeast neighbors, the Harlan neighbors, and all the other neighborhood associations. So I just want to make sure that what we're doing is just setting out a process, and we're using this South Willamette area kind of as a guinea pig and a crutch, and also to involve the neighborhoods. If we move forward with this and then go to, say, the Northeast neighbors or Harlan neighbors, any decisions that are made about the specifics, about any improvements or redevelopment going on in the South Willamette area will not be influencing any decisions. It's just a type of process that will be used. Is that correct?
Well, so
I don't want, at the end of the day, I don't want decisions to be made based on input from the South Willamette planning process that's going to make something totally unrelated to somewhere in the north end of town.
Constrained somewhere.
I think we've been
Constraints.
moving toward an individualized approach to different parts of the community, but I want the manager to tell you what he
Yeah, a couple things. One is what I do think is a good model, wherever you end up on here, is that the council up front approves a process going forward on these plans wherever they are. So I think that's a very helpful going forward. Now, each individual process may look a little bit different because one of the things that I think has come out of the Envision Eugene Community Resource Group feels like decades ago now, but it was quite a while, was to not treat every neighborhood the same, and that each neighborhood is different. Each neighborhood has their own challenges, concerns, issues, desires, things that they would like. And so I guess I'm agreeing with you is that the idea of having the council set the process up front in conjunction with neighborhoods is a good idea, and then that process and the outcome could be different depending on the needs of the neighborhood.
All right, thank you.
I would just, go to you next, Betty. And then back to George after Betty. The only thing I think about that is that we sort of put out two messages. So just want to clarify, because one message was sort of the template message, which gives people the notion that we're going to do the same thing everywhere. And now the clarification is that bring forward a process for each area and approach them with the help of those neighbors and those who are involved. Whether you need more clarification on that, but if we're all in general agreement about that, then I think that is the direction we intend to go.
So what our intent will be moving forward, assuming you take a position on this, that when we move into other neighborhoods, our intent would be as a part of that to eventually come back to you with a process that's co-developed with others that you approve kind of going forward. So it's on George's motion, it's the last sentence that would come back to you for any particular neighborhood going forward. That would be our intent from a staff perspective.
Eddie?
Yes, thank you. The refinement plans have always been done individually, one at a time. I don't think we could do them. That would be possible to do multiple ones all at the same time. When I first came on the council almost 20 years ago, we were in the process of adopting the Whitaker refinement plan, and no one has suggested that any other part of the city would be just like that. It's different. Some are already more developed than others, and some have different needs. So I don't think we need to worry about this being interfering with other neighborhoods. And I will support the motion. I think it's very well done. Thank you.
George?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, the initiative and well, actually every other refinement plan that the council has approved, I pointed out some similarities at our last meeting. They were all composed of local residents and businesses, and sometimes a specialized interest like a gravel pit company for the Wilkinsey, and Ida Patterson School for Jefferson, Far West, and then later an ex officio member from 4J for that. So it wasn't a group of people fighting for their own narrow special interests. They knew that wouldn't fly with council, and they were, citizens who realized that's not a civic way to approach a project like that. And so not only did they never have the idea of doing that, but if some of them even thought of it, they knew it would never fly. So, and the initiative which would be the basis for this planning process, actually incorporates several of the pillars from Envision Eugene, and certainly this planning team would never come up with anything that grossly violates any of the pillars of Eugene. And I'd like to also point out and just remind people, I hope people had a chance to actually, in the 2 weeks hiatus between our last meeting and today, that you had an opportunity to actually go online and look at some of the refinement plans, and you'd give you an idea of how I believe that this process will certainly go. And so I really think it's the way to move forward, and key is it just has to be done by the residents and local businesses, local interests, and they are going to, but they themselves will keep the whole community in mind as they're doing it, and not just selfishly think about their little part of town, us against them. That wasn't in any of the other refinement plans that were approved. All approved unanimously. That was another similarity. So I think this is a really good way to move forward. Thank you.
Catherine, would you bring Alan up to date on the rest of us too, on current wording?
Absolutely. So the friendly amendment that I heard being accepted by the maker and the second was replacing the first November 7th date for the preliminary draft proposal with the following: a check-in with council on the status and progress of the draft proposal no later than November 7, 2016.
Correct.
Is that?
Yes.
The check-in does not have to be at a work session. It could be electronically, because I know we're getting tight with the free dates are rapidly shrinking. So
That'd work for us too. That'd be great.
Yeah.
So, Alan, did you have any comments you wanted to make?
Yeah, I haven't watched this process for quite a while, and being involved in it, I walked away with 3 lessons from watching it and participating in it at the level that I did. One was, don't be exclusive, be inclusive in the process and who gets to play, who's involved. 2 was, constrain the boundaries as much as possible. And 3 was, I really think the counselors that are affected by this need to be involved in the process. So on the first one, don't be exclusive, be inclusive. It's not just the neighbors that have interests in an area. There are business owners, but there's also other types of points of view and interests that need to be incorporated into it, like renters and people who are focused on transportation issues and climate change perspectives and things like that. So there are lots of interests that go into these types of planning things that need to be thought about when we develop the group. It's not just the neighbors. Second, on the constrain the boundaries, I think if we had done that initially, we would have run into a lot less problems. If we had just said 29th to 24th and a half a block either way, east to west, we probably would have been done with this a long time ago. And then finally, the counselors that are affected by this, the 4 associations that are being put forth in the motion, I think the right ones. So the counselors that represent those should be the ones that focus on this initially and be involved in developing this plan too, and then they can be liaisons back to the rest of the council and have a better, deeper understanding of what's going on when it comes back to council. So that's my 3 cents.
Anybody else got anything else they need to say? Okay, we're ready to vote on this.
There's just that one.
All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Claire?
I'm going to vote no.
Okay. And Greg?
I'm voting yes.
So it's 7 in favor and 1 in opposition. It passes. And with that, we are finished with the business of our work session for today, and we'll reconvene at 7:30.